Okay, gang, good morning. If I want to sell you something and I want to find out the most effective way to sell it to you, there is a tremendous amount of information at my disposal that will teach me exactly how to appeal to your tastes, the things you like, the things you dislike, to appeal to our tendency to use heuristics in our decision making. I can use scientifically validated studies, and millions of them, to tailor my presentation to make it as persuasive as possible. When we make decisions, we use cognitive shortcuts. The name for that shortcut is heuristics. Heuristics. Heuristics allow us to make snap decisions. A common example that people give when they're talking about heuristics is you're walking home late at night and there is an easy path down a dark alley, let's say, to your home. There's also a longer path that goes, I don't know, let's say a block out of the way and takes a considerable amount of time longer. Ignoring the distance, you decide that you're going to take the dark alley, and there is a man in that dark alley. You can't really see his face. He's just standing in the alley, not doing anything. But in your mind, you have that right brain generating threats. It's generating a million different ways that that man is there to kill you. And based on the examples of men in dark alleys that come to mind immediately, movies, commercials, television shows, stories you heard about people being assaulted, all of these things flood your mind. And instantly, you generate the worst possible outcome, and is that guy is going to murder you. And you decide to go a different route. Now, that guy could have been standing there waiting to give you flowers. He could have been just waiting for somebody to come down his alley so he could start singing a song. And he has a beautiful voice and is a well-paid opera singer, but they're conducting an experiment to see if people use heuristics. And what you just did is you used, without any evidence, a cognitive shortcut that enabled you to make a decision that likely, at least in your mind, enhanced your survival. It enhanced well-being for you. And that makes that decision more likely to occur again in the future. So that consistency makes it even more persuasive when something like that happens again. So there are a handful of persuasion techniques that have been scientifically validated and tested in studies. I'll give examples as I can recall them or as they just come into mind. What's up, Sonny? How are you, man? So the first of these is reciprocity. And reciprocity simply means giving back. So if I tell you about all these great things that I'm doing for you, oh, and be conscious of this. So I want you to think of the 2016 election as I'm going through these things. Think of the DNC on one side and the GOP on the other side. So the Democrats and the Republicans are both competing to try and persuade you to give them power. Yeah, it's swampy, man. So both sides are trying to persuade you to give them power, to give them the authority to spend your tax dollars. Imagine those in your mind as I go through these heuristics. So reciprocity is giving something back. So if I want to exploit our tendency for reciprocity, which simply just it means sharing. Like you start sharing, someone initiates, you look at children, they share a piece of jerky or something with another kid. If that behavior is reinforced and a child shares something back with them, that reciprocity makes it likely that behavior is going to continue into the future. It'll happen over and over and over again. What's up, Sanaman? Reciprocity triggers something in our brain. It's likely evolutionary, but it's not so much about what is given or what is shared, but how it's shared. And this has been scientifically demonstrated. So if you look at the relationship between a waiter and a customer, if a waiter provides you with a after dinner mint, a little chocolate mint or a gift of some kind, a fortune cookie, something like that, prior to bringing you your bill, they've seen an increase in 3 to 5% on the amount that the waiter is tipped. If the waiter provides you with 2, the number does not double, it quadruples. And if they give you a mint, turn to walk away, then turn around and say, actually, you know what? You guys were such great customers. Here's a second mint. I believe the number is like 14 times the initial, 14 times the standard tip deviation from the average. And this has been, again, scientifically validated. So it's not so much what is given to you, but how it's given to you. And you can see this in political speech. Here are all the great things that I'm doing for you. Here are all the wonderful ways I'm spending your money. Here are all the wonderful ways that I'm spending the taxable earnings of 50% of the population. So right away, I gain 50% of the population who's not paying taxes because I'm giving them something. And if I can make it seem like I'm giving it to them because I'm their ally, or because I value them as people, or because I am on their side against someone else, that reciprocity heuristic is enhanced, it's amplified. All right. Second heuristic that we use to sell something is scarcity. A common example, at least that I've heard, would be diamonds. Diamonds are forever. Give her a diamond. I don't know, think of a commercial. So diamonds, the De Beers Corporation created, I couldn't tell you what year this was. I'm quickly glossing over this history. They created a consortium of diamond dealers, and these diamond dealers all agreed to fix prices effectively. And what happens is they only will release a certain number of diamonds on a schedule to maintain an artificial scarcity. So a diamond is just a rearrangement of carbon atoms. It's the same thing as the graphite in your pencil. That's graphene. If I lay those 6-ring carbons on top of one another flat, I get graphene. If I arrange them offset in a crystalline structure, I get a diamond. So a diamond is literally the same thing as graphite in your pencil, except the molecules are arranged differently. That's done through pressure, heat, and time. All right, so scarcity will influence people to buy something. You can see this, actually, if you live in Florida. I live in Florida. Every time there is a storm, a tropical storm that looks like it might come this way, based on my experience, even when the storms hit us, they're a joke. It's just a regular thunderstorm. All right, I'm coming over, buddy. But what happens? The news shows photos of empty shelves. Get out, stock up on water now, stock up on non-perishables now, because the shelves are running out, the stores are running out. So even if you weren't planning on going and stocking up on water and salt and sugar and things like that, what I've just created in your mind is the perception of scarcity. There's not going to be enough tomorrow, or there won't be enough later. If you don't get some now, you're going to lose out. That increases sales, just creating that perception, even if it's artificial, even if I merely suggest that, well, this thing might not always be around. You better buy this car now because these deals won't last. Any commercial you ever see, they're trying to tell you that if you don't act now, you're going to lose out. And what this is playing on, again, is a mechanism in your brain that evolved over 6 billion years, where I'm walking through the forest. I see a tree that has ripe fruit on it. If I am a primitive human without farming ability, etc., I'm a hunter-gatherer, it benefits me most to eat as much of that fruit as I physically can, pass out underneath the tree, get up, take a shit, drop those seeds, replenish the forest or replenish that tree, let's say, eat as much as I can again, and then leave. So it behooves me to have the perception that things are scarce, even if they're not. There could be plenty of other fruiting trees right now, but it benefits me in the here and now, what's up, Sambo, to consume as much of that product as I can. And marketers exploit that vulnerability in your brain. If I can convince this person through sleight of hand, through deception, through genuine appeals to them that this product or thing or service is scarce, they are going to be more inclined by multiple orders of magnitude to consume that product. All right, vote like your life depended on it. Vote as if it's your last election. You might not ever get to vote again if we elect this fascist dictator. If Hillary wins, you're going to lose your freedoms. Go and buy your guns right now, because if you don't buy guns now, you're not going to be able to buy them in the future. These are heuristic techniques, I guess I'll call them. All right, what else we got? Authority. So I think it's the third of the heuristics that are used to persuade. The argument from authority is pretty common in debates. It's pretty common in political discourse. Think of any news show you've seen. They're going to have a panel of experts, a panel of authorities on a given subject. Those authorities can be just as easily persuaded, just as easily misled, just as easily misinformed, just as easily uninformed or underinformed as you. Now, they may have a little bit more information than you do, or they may be a little more articulate and able to speak in a way that makes you think that they know more than you do. So it doesn't necessarily rely on their knowledge. It relies on their ability to convince you that they know more than you do. I'm a mechanic. I'm going to tell you that X, Y, and Z are issues with your car. If you were also a mechanic and you understood the mechanisms of your car, you could say quite easily that those things don't need to be repaired. It's actually only letter Z that needs to be repaired. The others are not serious problems. But because I have my mechanic certification on the wall, I have a shirt with my name on it that says certified technician or whatever it happens to be, you're more likely to defer to me as the authority on what your car needs or what you need. So that appeal to authority. As a African American, I can tell you this, and this about what it's like for people in the city. As a homosexual, I can tell you what Hillary or Trump's policies are going to be like for the gay community. Now, these people are claiming to be the representative voice of millions of people. Do you think it's likely that their position mirrors the position of all individuals in the group that they claim to represent? I don't think there's any chance that that's reality. But if I can say, here are my credentials up front, and then provide you with my argument, you're more likely to believe my argument. The appeal to authority or the argument from authority. This is a logical fallacy because it doesn't necessarily require an argument. If I tell you I'm an expert on foreign policy, and you are not, I'm assuming, because the number of people who are experts on foreign policy is very, very small, you're more likely to defer to my expertise on foreign policy because you won't even know if what I'm saying is completely insane. You defer to me, the argument from authority. I won't belabor that one. But the point is, I signal my expertise and then I persuade. And it makes the persuasion even more palatable. Next one's going to be consistency, the consistency heuristic. So we've covered reciprocity, scarcity, authority, and now consistency. I've posted about this before, and I think I've talked about it before, the media organizations in the United States. All of the major media outlets, all of the major television networks that run information and persuasion into your television set for you to consume. They're owned by 6 corporations. So effectively, those 6 corporations can control the information that you're consuming. And if they aim to convince you of a certain thing, a certain outcome, a certain belief, a certain position, they want to convince you of something. They want to persuade you. It's quite easy to persuade you, given that I have control over the flow of information. And if I know you're going to be tuning into your favorite show, I know you like watching, I don't know, Piers Morgan on television, whoever it happens to be. If I can get that person to use a specific word on a daily basis or a weekly basis or an hourly basis, I can plant a seed in your mind that links a image or a behavior or a sound to that word. So if I said gang, 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 and snap my fingers every time I say gang, it only takes a few times of doing that before just snapping my fingers will activate the part of your brain that received the word gang and processed the word gang. So if I wanted to say, convince you that the Hillary Clinton campaign was corrupt, I could say, crooked Hillary, crooked Hillary, crooked Hillary, crooked Hillary. Or if I wanted to convince you that Jeb Bush was tired and lazy, I would say, tired Jeb, he's low energy Jeb, low energy Jeb. If I wanted to convince you that Trump was a Russian agent, I would link Russia, Trump, Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia. I would link those 2 words. If I wanted to convince you that Ted Cruz was dishonest, even though he's very likely the most honest candidate in that race, I would say Lion Ted, Lion Ted, Lion Ted. Oh, you mean Lion Ted? Yeah, I heard about Lion Ted. Branding. Branding, branding, branding. That is what's happening when you're exploiting the consistency heuristic. If I want to get a particular message across, I have to make sure that message is consistent. Otherwise, people point out its flaws. So even if the message is a lie, if I maintain consistency, I can be persuasive with the lie. You look at the imams that go into more Western societies in Europe, for example. These are Wahhabi Muslims. And what Wahhabism means is a literal interpretation of Quran and Hadith. The word of Allah, as encoded in the Quran, is true and infallible. The actions, words, and person of, what's his fucking name? Their prophet, Muhammad. The actions, words, and being of Muhammad is true and infallible. All things in Quran and Hadith are to be taken literally and exactly. That's Wahhabism. So these imams are consistent. Even though there are contradictions within Islam, even within the same text, if I'm consistent in my position that this is correct, anything you say is a challenge against the true and undisputed authority of Allah and Muhammad, his prophet. Because I know you are kafir, your opinion, your words, your arguments are irrelevant, because I know that it is your mission to try and challenge the one true God. That consistency makes those non-arguments persuasive, and it makes them immensely persuasive. I guess 20 to 25% of the world now is Islamic, whereas at the time of Muhammad, it may have been 2%. And then you have a few hundred people around him, and spread and spread and spread. So it's not so much the validity of your argument. What you're saying doesn't even have to be true. But if you say it enough times, people start to believe the lie, particularly if you can get people to repeat the lie that you've just persuaded them to believe is true. Once you've repeated it, once you've said it out loud, it's pretty much locked in. So if I want to convince you Trump is a Russian agent, I say Trump Russia enough times, I get you to say Trump Russia to a friend, or I get you to say it publicly. Regardless of whether I've provided any evidence to substantiate that claim, I've said it consistently. That consistency makes it persuasive. Your repeating that makes it even more persuasive, because when you're confronted with evidence that is counter to your position, you're faced with cognitive dissonance, and you have to either double down or accept that new information and the ego hit that comes with changing your position. That's heuristic number 4, consistency. Next one is liking. So we have reciprocity, scarcity, authority, consistency, and liking. This one's pretty simple. We're more likely to buy things or accept things or be persuaded by people who we like. People who are more like us in appearance, in demeanor, in language, in whatever. We're more likely to be persuaded by people like us. We want them to be similar. We want them to complement us, and actual compliment and you know, a metaphysical compliment. My wife is an excellent compliment to me. But complimenting, meaning, oh, your hair looks nice. Where'd you get those shoes? Drawing attention to material things or to behaviors or appearance of the person you're trying to persuade makes them more likely to be persuaded by you. It casts you in a positive light. It makes people like you more and makes them more easily persuaded, more easily malleable. So another thing that does this is something that is cooperative. If you've worked on teams with people and where your team dynamic is good and people are willing to cooperate, you're more likely to be persuaded by people with whom you've cooperated toward a common goal. Teammates, co-workers, relationship partners, etc. Those people will more easily persuade you than people you have not been in a cooperative relationship with. So you have attraction, similarity, complementary, and cooperativity. Those things all go into liking, and someone you like will more easily persuade you. If I'm a politician, I want to convince you that I'm like you. I'm just like when I'm doing research to run for president or mayor or governor, whatever it happens to be. I'm looking for the central position, the Aristotelian mean. I want to find a position that is going to appeal to the most people. And the way I do that is through polling, through observation, through psychological studies, etc. I want to take a position that is as vanilla as possible while still appealing to the majority and not marginalizing the minority. This is how the game is played. This is how you market products. This is how you market yourself. Last one is consensus. This one we just saw a few days ago, or maybe it was a week ago. A resurgence of the consensus among our intelligence agencies. So immediately following the election, after the DNC created this Russian collusion story with Christopher Steele, the media, who was very friendly to one candidate, perhaps even because they were legitimately scared that we had just elected a fascistic dictator, the media effect doesn't only affect regular news consumers, regular people. The people who are repeating those lies become the victim of their own propaganda. So you can see this in the FBI, you can see it in the CIA, you can see it in news anchors, you can see it in Hollywood. People who are fully convinced that the president is a Russian agent despite zero evidence to support that conclusion. They'll point to the Mueller investigation and say, see, he's investigating Trump. But the Mueller investigation is sealed up tight. There are no leaks coming from the Mueller investigation, so anything you're hearing about it is speculative. anything you're hearing about what they're looking into is speculative, because they more or less have carte blanche to investigate election interference, not Trump-Russia connections. So the consensus position is a persuasion technique. Well, if you don't believe this Russia lie, 17 intelligence agencies independently confirmed that Russia hacked the election. Okay, there are a number of ways you can take that apart based on the language that was used. But what do you think the chances are that 17 agencies, number one, independently looked at all of the information to make that conclusion? Number two, agreed. Do you think there's a 1% chance that that happened? If you're in a room with 10 people and you guys all see something happen, and this has been demonstrated, almost all of those people will give a different version of what it is that happened, even though they all witnessed the same event. We have psychological pitfalls that predispose us to lie about what happened, maybe not intentionally, but once we've said it out loud, we've solidified that version of reality. So as soon as I say it out loud, I get that consistency heuristic. If I get other people to agree with me and we all come to a consensus about what happened, we're going to like those people more. We get the consistency heuristic, and we get the consensus heuristic. So I say a lie enough times, I convince you that something is scarce. I provide something to you to give you the perception of reciprocity. I say it enough to make it seem consistent. I appeal to you from a position of authority or expertise. I get you to like me with my charisma, my intelligence, my personality, and I establish that we all believe the same thing. All of the intelligence agencies concluded that Russia hacked the election. Keep in mind, these are the same intelligence agencies that had reached a consensus, and they were 100% proof positive, certain, that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, and we went in and overthrew a democratically elected president and murdered him because we had a consensus that he had weapons of mass destruction. To this day, 17 years into the war on terror, which in reality is a war against Islam, but we can't say that. 17 years into this war, we still have not found weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. Yet, all of the same intelligence agencies that told you Russia hacked the election told you that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. We know that they were lying then, and yet we accept the consensus now because it's wrapped in all of these other heuristics. So this is something Scott Adams talks about pretty frequently, how subjective our reality is. And I talked about it yesterday, I believe, about how, I think it's up on YouTube, about how our perception lenses are distinct. And the closer we can get our perception to one another through empathy and through understanding of the other person's perspective, the more likely we are to be able to see the same goal and attain it. Our reality is subjective, and depending on the filter that we're viewing reality through, we might be seeing two different movies even though we're sitting in the same theater. Some filters more reliably predict the future. And this is my rub, let's say, with the Trump is a buffoon, he's evil, he's a Russian agent, he wants to get rich at the expense of America and collapse the republic. Let's say Trump is anti-America. So the problem with that filter is that it doesn't explain his actions. His actions indicate that he is pro-America. And there is no way I can accept Trump is pro-America through a filter that says Trump is anti-America. it's inconsistent. It causes that cognitive dissonance where I'm wrestling with my own conclusion based on new information. I double down on the conclusion I've already reached, or I accept the new information, I take the hit to my ego, and I change my position. So there's no way I can see Trump as competent, intelligent, having my best interest in mind if I'm viewing it through a filter that says Trump is incompetent, doesn't have my best interests in mind, and is anti-America. It's impossible for me to see it. It's like putting on blue blocker glasses and trying to see the color blue. I can't see it. I'm physically blind to it. So there's no way that I can accept it. What do I got here? The next thing was maps of meaning. I'm not going to get into it. I want to save some brain power for when I get to school here. But Maps of Meaning is a book about psychology and evolutionary psychology, and how if I'm standing at point A, I want to get to point B. The path I choose to point B, I think, is going to get me there. If path B doesn't get me there, I'm in a new frame at a new point A, looking at a new point B. And that happens over and over and over through time. So there are certain filters, certain things that I can accept, certain heuristics I can employ that will make me successful across multiple frames and get me closer and closer to point B. That's it in a nutshell. And something else I wrote down was about bias. If you want to think about whether something is bias or not, take news coverage, for example. If you think that the news coverage is biased against President Trump, or you think news coverage is biased for President Trump, picture what the opposite of what you're looking at is. So if, for example, 98% of news coverage in the U.S. corporate media is negative. When they're talking about Trump, 98% of the coverage is negative, with 2% being positive, give or take. Invert it. 98% positive coverage from the press of the president versus 2% negative coverage. Do you believe that that would be biased? From your perspective, however you feel about the president, however you feel about the media. If the inverse is biased, then the obverse is biased as well. Pretty easy check. Have a good day, guys. We'll see you.